you guys a little bit about Tajikistan today, because I know you all knew where it was before you saw it on that map. You guys are amazing geography people. They go in Russia, they go around on the streets in America and ask them questions and show them videos all over Russia about geography. Because I don't know, maybe it's something we're not that great at, but they'll be like, they'll ask people questions about, where is the capital of this, or where is this country? And they love watching videos of Americans going, oh, I have no idea. And it's like Russian humor is watching Americans be uneducated about geography. So that's okay. You didn't need to know where Tajikistan was. You probably know where other things are. But before I talk about Tajikistan, I want to talk about something that's a little bit more familiar, something that's a little bit more we have in common. And that's the subject of fear. And fear is an interesting thing because, a lot of times fear is something that can be pretty irrational, unexplainable. Why people fear certain things, they don't fear other things. And you get a picture of this, especially when you get close to somebody else, like in a family environment or a close relationship, because you get to see firsthand somebody else fearing something, and you think to yourself, why are they afraid of that? And then they come towards you, and they see about your concerns and worries and fears, and they think the same thing. And so you kind of get this picture of, wow, sometimes fear just has kind of an irrational component to it. I've seen this in my own family with my mother-in-law. She came to visit us when we lived in Russia, and when we were there, we took her four-wheel driving, and we're going up this mountain, and it doesn't matter what the road was like. This is a pretty bad road, but still, it doesn't matter what the road is like. She just, if you get in that environment, she's just like, I can't handle it. And so we're going, and we paused for a second. She, jumped out of the car and, stood on the side there. And we kind of negotiated with her. We ended up leaving her there for a little while and eventually coming back. But she's home now in America. But she was just, deathly afraid of four-wheel driving. It's really nice to leave your mother-in-law on the side of the road in the middle of Russia. But we had to get to the top. My father-in-law had to see the view. It was beautiful at the top. So we're still going. But what's funny is my wife, totally, here's the generational line. She has the same fear. And so I love camping. We do a lot of camping on the weekends, and I'm always trying to find these places that are far away in the middle of nowhere and usually requires some kind of access on some four-wheel drive road to go there. And so she's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go. She usually ends up giving in. And so this summer, for instance, we're going up this awful road, and she's 8.5 months pregnant. And so I don't know if you've ever been four-wheel driving with 8.5 months pregnant, where I'm I was looking over, she's like, bum, 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 bum. And I'm like, oh, wow. I hope that baby's okay. But before you judge me, just remember that Jesus spent 4 days on a donkey in Mary's belly on the way to Bethlehem. So he turned out okay. And and that's funny, that's my daughter, because I have two sons and a daughter. And the two sons have never been afraid of four-wheel driving. We've taken them, and my son was 7 months old the first time we went 2 hours off-roading to get somewhere. And we held his head to keep him from, keep his little neck fine. But none of them have ever been afraid of four-wheel driving. But we get to my daughter, who's 2, and for some reason, only when we're on the downhill side and she's in her little car seat, she just goes, scared, and so it's this line of fear that I just don't understand. It's this, there's someone in there that you get four-wheel driving, and they're just like, oh, I can't do it. I woke up with a fear this morning, and I was afraid that you guys, only Beth would laugh at my jokes. And thank you. It's already materializing into that, but I asked Beth to laugh every time. See, this is coming from inside of her, so you guys can take the cues too. So you have these fears, and sometimes our fears aren't a big deal, right? Because it's not necessarily something that you should do anyways. Maybe it's not even a good idea. Sometimes it's not even something that you need to do. But sometimes our fears are tied to the very things that we were created to do. And they're tied to the very things that God has in store for us so that we can fulfill our destiny. And when you use the word fear, sometimes it can feel a little foreign, because when we think of fear, we think about fear of the dark, or fear of snakes, or fear of heights. But when you use the word anxiety, worry, or concern, sometimes it hits a little more at home. Because I can tell you my own journey is that I'm somebody who struggled with anxiety, who struggled with having worry, who's having concern about my future, about different kinds of things. And it's been a battle for me. And in the middle of that battle, I've sensed that God has been calling me my whole life to be a man of great faith. And I don't know if you know this, but fear and faith are opposites. So in the midst of a struggle with fear, God has been calling me to be a man of faith. And what I want to do today is, from my own journey, share with you a couple of insights of things that God has taught me and how to move from fear and into a place of faith. And we're going to do that by looking at the story of David, a man who showed a whole nation how to overcome fear. I'm assuming most of you guys have a general rubric of the David story, so David and Goliath. And so I'm not going to retell it, but you can go back in 1 Samuel 17. You can read the whole thing at home if you want to. I'm just going to kind of narrow in on a couple places that have lessons for us to learn today. And so, here we go. So at the beginning of the story, you have two groups of people. You have the Philistines, and you have the Israelites. And there's this valley, and you have the Israelites on one side, kind of up, looking down into the valley. You have the Philistines on the other side, looking up, looking down into the valley. And all of a sudden, out of the Philistine group comes this ginormous man named Goliath. And he starts to talk. And he says this in verse 8. He says, "Why are you all coming out to fight? I am the Philistine champion, and you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." You know, I think if Goliath were alive today, he would probably be an amazing professional wrestler, because he would have said this and gone, "Woo!" You know, like a Ric Flair thing. Talk about his smackdown. And the reason, I don't know if you guys are watching professional wrestling, but it's like 10% fighting, but it's 90% them getting up and going, "Oh yeah, here it comes. Here comes the smackdown." And here's Goliath. He's doing that. He gets out there, hasn't done anything, but he's big and he's kind of impressive. And he starts telling them about all this stuff that he's going to do and what it's going to be like. And he starts trash talking them. And they're pretty frightened by this. Because it says in verse 11, it says, "When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken." See, fear, when it comes into your life, it will always trash talk you. And the purpose of trash talk is to do two things. The first is to raise itself up. I am a Philistine champion. I am this awesome, scary giant. I am so big, there's nothing you can do to fight me. I am terrifying. And then the second thing it does is it tears you down. You are just a servant of Saul. You guys are all standing there and you're being led by a guy who's too afraid to come out and fight me. And that's who you're under. That's your leader. That's your level. You're nothing. Because the first source of fear is what you believe about who you are and what you believe about the thing that you fear. And when you listen to fear's trash talk, when you listen to fear explaining away and who it is and what it is that you're facing, and you listen to fear and explaining who you are, and you partner with those thoughts, and you begin to accept them as your reality, you will always be on the sidelines in life. See, David, in the midst of this, comes in with a completely different perspective. He comes out to the battlefield, and he starts talking to people about what's going on. And they say this, they say, "Have you seen this giant? Because when they think about Goliath, their perspective of Goliath, he's a giant. They're agreeing with this idea, he is this big guy, there's nothing we can do. And that's kind of their perspective. David comes into that, and this is what he's hearing. And he says, who is this pagan Philistine anyway? That he's allowed to defy the armies of the living God. So when David talks about Goliath, David thinks about Goliath as a pagan Philistine. And so what he's saying and what he's verbalizing and expressing to the people around him is, this guy doesn't have God. This guy doesn't have any backing from the Lord. He's a pagan. He's somebody that we don't need to worry about. Whereas these guys are thinking giant, David's thinking pagan Philistine. Somebody who is not threatening to me. And then when he talks about us, whereas, Goliath saying the servants of Saul, he says that he's allowed to defy who? The armies of the living God. Later, when David comes out to fight Goliath, he says this, he said, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. See, David knew who he was, and he knew God's perspective of the problem that he was facing. And because he lived in that place, that was the reality, that was his perspective on life and his perspective on this specific situation, he was able to get off the sidelines and go right into battle and have victory. See, there's two things that we need to do to overcome fear. The first is to get God's perspective on the thing that we fear. That thing that's causing us concern, that thing that causes us to have anxiety, causes us to think at night, that causes us to have these long conversations with our significant other or spouse or somebody about this situation that I just can't, we've got to figure out. The first thing we need to do is get God's perspective on that thing. And I'm going to tell you his perspective. I'm going to make it really easy for you. And it's 2 words. There's God's perspective on everything that you've ever faced in your life and everything that you're ever going to face in your future. It's no problem. It's not a problem. That's how God thinks about the things that you're facing. He thinks, that's not a problem. And every time that we get out of that perspective and we get somewhere else is when we enter that realm of concern, of worry, of anxiety. There's this question, how do I get from here, this place of concern and anxiety and fear, to this place where I can embrace God's perspective on a problem with no problem? One thing that I found is that we can look at what it is that we say about the thing that we're facing. We can look at the words that we use to describe it. Because when we talk about it, are we using words like, dude, this thing is impossible. I have no idea how I'm ever going to be able to do anything about this. This marriage is never going to work out. This thing is never going to work out. It's never going to be solved. It's not something that I have the capacity to do. You build it up in your mind. And it's funny because, something starts like this, and then you start to talk about it, and it just becomes so much bigger than the original issue. And all of a sudden, we give it this power, and it grows and grows and grows because of the words that we're speaking about that thing. I've been ministering now with Muslims for about 7 years. And often for me, Goliath is the picture that God will use when I think about Islam. Because sometimes, to me, it feels like that. It feels like this unbeatable thing. Because right now, my desire is to see people come into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That is our goal. And I'm working with people who are Muslims. And Islam is an interesting thing right now. By 2050, right now there's 1.5 billion Muslims. So they say by 2050 there will be the same number of Muslims as there are Christians in the world. And by 2070 there will be even more. And when I'm trying to think about sharing the gospel with somebody, the good news that Jesus, God came in the form of Jesus. He came and he died for you. And that the Bible, you can read about this. When you come and talk to a Muslim, they're told from the time they're born that Jesus is not the Son of God, that Jesus did not die on the cross, and that the Bible has been corrupted. And so you're coming into this kind of environment and you're thinking, okay, now I'm going to try to share Jesus with somebody. And a lot of times I can begin to imagine this thing as much bigger than it is. And I start to, people ask me about my ministry, oh, what do you do? I minister in Muslim. How is that? Oh, man, it's hard. Because I'll tell you, Islam is like people, they already have an idea about who Jesus is. And so you're trying to change the idea. It's so much harder than somebody who is you come into this tribe in Africa, they've never heard about the gospel, you tell them about Jesus, and it's whoa, that's amazing news. So I'm talking about it's hard. And, they already have all these ideas about it, and they're super just into religion. And it is, there's so many people been on the field and I'm around all these believers, other missionaries who work there, and they're like, yeah, it's, you can get together and talk about it. Yeah, it's kind of you work, and then sometimes somebody comes to faith, but we're just being faithful, and this thing is just so hard. And so you start, in your language, in the way you describe it, in the way that you picture it and imagine it, it becomes this thing that's just I'll just do whatever I can, but not really expect anything to happen. And it's interesting, there are moments when I'm in the middle of one of those kind of talking sessions about how hard my work is, when God will remind me of some things. That before the year 1900, there had only been one movement to Christ among Muslims in 1,350 years. Muhammad, the Quran, all that stuff happened in the 600s. Until the year 1900, there had been one movement to Christ. And a movement to Christ is over 1,000 people, multiple groups of people coming to know Jesus. There had been some people here and there, but an actual movement to Christ. Before 2000, after that, before the year 2000, there were 10 movements to Christ among Muslim people groups. From 2000 to 2016, there's been over 70 movements to Christ among Muslims. And so God will remind me, Johnny, guess what I'm doing all over the world? There's nothing that is impossible for me. When God is thinking about something, He's thinking already about how to come in and to do something in the middle of your problem. So He gets me from that place into this place. I often compare it to Joseph. Joseph had the most awful thing in his life happen. But God was already working to redeem it and make it to be one of the most significant moments of salvation the world has ever seen. And that is what I believe about Islam. I believe that God is going to even use the fact that they already know about Jesus, that they already know about the prophets, to have thousands and thousands and thousands of these 1.5 billion people in these final days before Jesus comes, coming to know Him. Or maybe you're somebody who has been, you just make things happen. And you know how to put everything in line and organize everything super efficiently and to use the principles of the world that create amazing results and create amazing success. But you realize that there's a wall that you're hitting, and this wall is because you get to that point of significance and you feel it, you know it, that it's just not exactly what you were searching for of purpose and fulfillment, and that's because you're hitting that wall. And so today is about just saying, God, I'm tired of just being the only one trying to make this happen. And I want to be in a place where I can say, God, I know you did it and you're going to do it again. And all of us, honestly, are somewhere on that spectrum in both respects. There's probably moments for each of us where God is just going to speak to you. I want you to step out and be bold in this relationship. I want you to get off the couch and I want you to engage with your wife. I want you to go and have the conversation you're supposed to have with your boss. I want you to not just let your kids run wild, but do the things that you've been thinking about doing, or the book you've been thinking about reading about parenting, about how to kind of enter into that situation that feels so overwhelming. And then there's going to be moments for each of us where we've just been trying to push this thing through and make it happen, and we just need to say, God, I can't do this on my own. Or we're sitting on the sidelines, and God is like, come on, let's do this together. So what I want to do today is I just want to give us a little time to respond. We're just going to pray and we're going to sing a worship song. But what I want to do is I want to give you guys a moment with the Holy Spirit where you can say, Lord, I need your help. I need it to be you and me. And I need you to show me who I am. I need you to give me a big fat revelation about who I am. Because I can guarantee you, as many times as you get this thing, as many times as you get this revelation, you're going to need to get it again tomorrow. Like if you get it today, you're going to wake up tomorrow and you go to work and be like, talk to that person and you'd be like, okay, I need it again. So let's just ask God for it again. And if there's anybody, I don't know you guys, if there's anybody who like this idea of doing partnership with Jesus is a first time step, because there is an initial moment for all of us when we say, I want to be a son. This idea, you're a son of God, you walk in power, that is only accessible to you if you know Jesus. So God, I'm just asking for a revelation today. Lord, right now, we just say, we all acknowledge you. There's been many areas we've tried to do life on our own. We've tried to do things by ourselves, and it's just left us on the sidelines over and over. So if this resonates with you, you can just say it in your heart. Just, God, forgive me for trying to live life by myself. Jesus, I want you to come and help me. I want to live in partnership with you, with God. Thank you for dying for me, Jesus. Thank you for taking all my sin and making me into a son, into a daughter. I receive you in a moment. And God, we're asking for everybody to pray right now. For everybody in this revelation of who we are. Lord, just like you did for Jesus, open up the heavens, and the Father came out and he said, this is my Son, my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. I'm asking you, Father, would you do the same for people today? Would you come, would you open up the heavens right now over their hearts, open up the heavens over their minds, open up the heavens over their emotions right now in Jesus' name. And would you speak? Would you speak into people's emotions right now, God? Speak into their minds. Speak into their souls, speak into their spirits, Lord, that you are my Son. I'm well pleased with you. My beloved. And God, wherever there's anxiety, wherever there's fear,
help us spread the message. Click on the donate button below or go to ShermanOaksPC.org/donate. Thank you.